welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessikah with Turn the Page podcast, Syosset Library's podcast, and I am here with an author who wrote a really cool book called The Book of Cold Cases.
Hey, I'm Simone St. The Book of Cold Cases is my mix of true crime, mystery, thriller, paranormal with a dash of romance. That's the short version. It's just about an infamous serial murder case from the 70s, which is not a real case. It's one I made up. And there was a woman who was accused of the murders and she was acquitted. And in the present day, a true crime blogger gets the chance to interview her and to hear what really happened back in the 70s during these murders. And it's a bit of a trip. And it's kind of a fun sort of thriller, true crime, paranormal mashup.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of everything, and I'm glad that you kind of hit, with the romance, because that was a really nice little surprise there. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, although I don't want to talk too much about it because I think people need to read it to see where that kind of comes in.
It's hard to talk about this book without spoilers, for sure.
I know, it really, really is. Really, really hard. These interviews or these chats that we do, where it's like one of these books that you're like sort of stepping around the big plot points you don't want to give away, are always fun. So let's try to get into it and avoid spoilers.
Right.
So there's a few things about this particular book that I really enjoyed, that I found unique and refreshing. First of all, Shay, the main character, a lot of the reason she is drawn to true crime is because she was very much nearly the victim of something that would have been a true crime. Actually, it was that happened to her, but didn't. She escaped the situation. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I am a huge fan of true crime. I consume a lot of podcasts and books and everything, and it's part of what I was going for with this book. And again, like with my books, I 100% I make up all of the cases. There's nothing there. I don't reference any real cases, but it's sort of about how, especially with women, where the women are a huge audience for true crime. And it's sort of about how a lot of us use it as a way to process sometimes things that have directly happened to us, or things that could have happened to us, or things we felt like, what if I'd taken and made a different choice in a certain situation, something bad could have happened to me. And that's sort of one of the reasons that women like true crime so much, is that we use it as a way to process all of that, I think. And so that's kind of, I was sort of meditating on that with that character. And she's had this situation where she was kind of a part of a crime and possibly the victim of a crime. And in her adult life, her obsession with true crime is how one of the ways she's trying to process it.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about it was just how it affected her relationships, which actually is a very important point with the other somewhat main character of the story, Beth, who is a famous or socialite, I guess is the best way to put it, heiress, socialite. She comes from a family that had money, and with that there were secrets as well. And she's the one who is considered the perpetrator of a crime, but she was never, they could never really 100% pin it on her, called the lady killer crime. So, like one thing that I've always thought was interesting just about true crime stories is obviously most of the ones we hear about the perpetrators are men. And
Right.
when there's a woman who is considered the murderer, people seem to approach it a little bit differently. So Beth was a really interesting character to read. Was she interesting to write as well?
She was, and that was part of it. As I say, I love true crime, and of course, true crime as we know it is extremely fixated on serial killers, usually about a dozen of really super high profile serial killer cases. And one of the things I was thinking about is, if you take one of those cases, any one of those major, high profile serial killer cases, and you make it that the suspect is a woman instead of a man, it isn't just a simple switch. To make the suspect a woman changes every single thing about that case. It changes how it's investigated, how it's written about in the media, how it's tried in the courts, how it's seen decades later. Everything about it is different. And so that was what I was exploring with that is, what if you had this sort of infamous serial killer case and the suspect was a woman? It is a completely different thing. And then you have a situation where she's going to interview this woman who is suspected of murder. If you're going to interview a woman who is suspected of murder, the question is, are you scared? Like, you'd think going to interview a male serial killer, you're like, oh my God, like I'm taking my life into my hands. But then you're going to interview a woman and she's actually wondering to herself, she's like, am I scared? I think I am. I don't know, so it's a whole different dynamic. And it was really, really fun to explore that dynamic, especially, as I say, a completely fictional setting. So I could make it work however I wanted. And I got to explore that dynamic any way I wanted. And it was definitely really fun to write, really fun to write.
And not only is she interviewing her, she's going to her house.
Right.
And I don't
Which
want
again,
to,
if that
yeah.
was a man, if you were going to Ted Bundy's house to interview him as a lone woman, you'd be like, this is a stupid idea.
Yeah.
But it's a woman, so she's actually asking herself, is this a stupid idea? I don't know.
Yeah, that was super interesting. And I myself was like, well, I mean, we don't for sure 100% know that Beth is the killer. I'm still
Right.
pretty early on reading this book, but
Right.
maybe it's still a stupid idea to go to somebody's
Right.
house. But I mean, it really kind of gave some good dimension just to the character and the situation. So, you get snippets of the story as it was when Beth was a young woman, and
Mhm.
sort of her reaction to things and how people reacted to what she did around that time. Oh, was she a partier? Did she
Right.
date? Did she show remorse?
Right.
Is she sad because she lost her parents? Pretty much just every bit of her is on display. And it was wild to me that, of all the people she decided to let in, she was just like, okay, Shay, you can do this, because Shay was pretty brash in being
Right.
like, I know, like, she met her at a doctor's office where she was working. She's like, I know
Right.
who you are. I'm this true crime blogger. I liked that she was just like, okay, sure, we'll do
Right.
this.
And then from Shay's point of view, Shay is going, well, this person might be a murderer or some type of sociopath or psychopath. She's wondering, like, is this straightforward, or why did she pick me? Like, is there an agenda? Is there some reason, some sinister reason she picked me? And she doesn't know the answer to that question. Like, she just genuinely does not know the answer to that question. And Beth is not about to tell her the answer to that question. So there is a lot of cat and mouse going on in that relationship.
Yeah, there is. And there's other relationships that Shay gets to explore. For instance, the people who had investigated Beth herself, who are still within the police departments in one way or the other, or at least, still alive.
Right.
There was just a lot of mood in this story, and we haven't even gotten to the house, which is haunted with history and maybe other things as
Right.
well.
Right.
Did you have
Yeah,
like
I
a
mean,
clear
yeah,
picture in
that's
your
a
head?
whole other
Yeah,
level or layer that goes into it. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Did you have a clear picture in your head of like what the house looked like, how many rooms there were, what that kitchen looked like?
Yeah, I did. And it was fun to write because a story about a haunted house, of course. I mean, traditionally you picture something that's maybe Victorian and Gothic and old. And so I deliberately made this a mid-century modern house. Like it's got like avocado green kitchen and and like just that whole sort of aesthetic, which currently has had a big resurgence. So that aesthetic is actually very fashionable and very expensive in the moment. But of course, Beth's house is original mid-century, like was decorated in the 50s and 60s, and it's never changed. But so I wanted to make that. I just thought that was kind of cool to like a house that's like a 60s house that's really, really haunted is not something you usually see or expect. You usually expect it to be some old cobwebby haunted house. So I definitely had a very clear picture of it. I wanted to make it kind of unusual in that sense.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was recently looking for a new stove and I saw things that were avocado color and I was like,
And
really? We're doing this?
that's
This is what
probably
we're doing?
expensive, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like people who bought houses, the neighborhood I live in is uh, Levittown,
Mhm.
and that's was the style back then. Obviously not as grand as Beth's house,
Right.
but some of the houses, when you go in to look at them, which the original owners, like it still has all of that, and
Right.
people just cannot wait to rip it out. So I
Yeah.
find it very funny. But there was something really great about Shay stepping into this time period, like
Yeah.
this capsule in time where Beth was frozen
Right.
and reliving some of the worst points of her life. So,
Mhm.
like, not only is Beth surrounded by this mystery and possibly being haunted, but
Mhm.
that just the world that she lives in is a ghost itself.
Right.
And so is Shay in a very different way.
Yes, yes, for sure. And that Beth invites her to do the interview at the house again. It's very deliberate. Like she's not randomly asking that. She wants Shay to come to the house and kind of see the things that she sees or experience the thing that she experiences. And so from Shay's point of view, she's like, why does she want me drawn into this? Because it's very deliberate on Beth's part, that where she is like, I am picking this person and you are going to come to my house, which is kind of like you are going to see what I see every day. And so it draws these two women together, in the sense that they are both now Shay is the only one who has true insight into what Beth's life is like, but at the same time they do not trust each other. There's a lot of cat and mouse. Shay always knows that Beth is kind of playing some sort of chess game with her, and she's trying her hardest to keep up and figure it out. So that relationship is the center of the whole book, and it was tremendously fun to write. Actually, that relationship was relatively easy for me to write because I could see so clearly how these two were going back and forth. Um, so that really is the backbone of the book and the story, is those two women and just that relationship between the two of them.
There's other relationships between women in the story, but we're dancing around spoilers, so I'm not going to say anything about it.
Right.
So the story is set in Oregon.
Yes.
What a great place to set a story like this.
I just wanted it to be very rainy.
Oh
So,
yeah, you got it.
yeah.
You can't beat that area for rain. And not that I don't love it. I've been there.
Yeah.
It's very nice. But yeah, the setting is really just very atmospheric, almost in kind of like I guess the way that San Francisco was atmospheric for Vertigo.
Right.
like you need certain things for certain stories to kind of hit. And
Yes.
for that, obviously because fear of heights was so important,
Right.
that worked. But this man, was Oregon a great setting for this story?
Yeah, and it just sort of carries into the, I mean, I love rainy weather. I think it's beautiful, but but when you're doing a story, it carries into like the feeling of, I don't know, just things sort of maybe sort of fixed and unmoving and maybe, sinking, those types of feelings. It's not sort of brisk, fresh air, open air, sunshine kind of a feeling. So I wanted, and it's a little bit claustrophobic when it's really raining like that. So I kind of wanted to bring all of that atmosphere in, to add another layer to the what's going on.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we go is, so the book is called The Book of Cold Cases, which is
Mhm.
also the name of Shay's blog.
Yeah.
I think that personally, like, cold cases in general are such almost its own little niche in true crime, because
Mm.
you have the things that you can follow from beginning to end, and you
Yes.
know that there is a closing to it. And
Right.
in a way, there's power in knowing, okay, well, this ended.
Mhm.
And with a cold case, it's almost the opposite. And there are just so many people, women, who follow these and almost try to solve them themselves.
Mhm.
What do you think the allure of cold cases is?
Um, I yeah, it is, maybe it is that feeling that for some people, like, I'm going to try, if I try to put the pieces together myself. But I think that what really in it draws people in is that unfinished feeling. Like you kind of can't leave it alone. It's like, I gotta know, like, what this is bugging me, And so it's, that's sort of part of what the book is about. Like, even though what happened to Shay technically in the courts got resolved, but to her it's not finished. Like, she's not done with it. It's still bothering her. It still keeps her up at night. And and what happened to with Beth is a giant question mark. Like, nobody knows what really happened. Nobody knows who did it. Nobody knows if she did it. And so it's just like this, it's kind of an unfinished business. And that really is a very powerful thing to kind of fascinate people. It's just the unfinished business. And it's sort of a feeling like I can't rest until I finish this. So that's really kind of where that was coming from. And there's a, there's also, when you consume a lot of true crime, you start to understand, even with the cases that get resolved, you don't get all the explanations that you want. Why did this person do this? You don't really know, and they try, psychologists and cops, and they try and explain, well, this person was mentally ill, or this person had a bad childhood. But you get right into it, and it's like, you don't really know why one person does something and someone else who also had a bad childhood didn't do that thing. So it's, I was really digging into that feeling of unfinished business, and not trying to get that explanation that maybe you'll never completely get. You'll only maybe get some of it, and you might not ever get all of it.
Yeah, one of my coworkers and I talk about this a lot, and we kind of consider true crime almost like, this is going to sound terrible, but self-care for anxious people.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're anxious yourself, I guess, putting the anxiety of something else onto, you, and occupying your mind with that, it is a transfer.
It is. And it's a
Yeah.
way to, when you're talking about someone else's case or someone else's experience, it's a way for you to talk about your own experience without actually having to share your own experience. So it's a way for you to be like, you're just talking about how that feeling, those feelings that you've had, or something that you've been through or almost been through or thought that could have happened. But you don't have to actually dig deep and open up your own story. You get to kind of, like you say, transfer to someone else's story and kind of talk about your own story through that lens. And I think that happens a lot. Yeah.
One more thing. I feel like I'm Columbo here. I'm like, oh, one more thing. Thank you for giving Shay a cat.
Oh, I love my cat.
Yeah, I was very happy that she learned the joy of cat ownership, especially.
And it's not a spoiler. I'll tell you right now, the cat does not get killed. I will never kill the cat. I will never kill the cat.
I wouldn't mention it if the cat got killed. If the cat got killed, I would have like maybe stopped recording and been like, Simone, why?
You need to fix this. Believe me, I would never write that. I can't read it. There's no way I could write that scene. There's no way it could happen. So I'll tell readers right now, that's the only spoiler I'll give. The cat does not get killed.
Simone will always save the cat.
I will always save the cat every time.
All right. Well, we look forward to reading anything that you have coming up. I don't know if you're working on anything at the moment.
There's another book coming after this one for sure. Yeah, there will be details as soon as everything is ready to go. But yes, there's another book coming.
Very exciting. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us and saving the cat and talking about true crime. And for the Book of Cold Cases, it was a really great atmospheric, I can't speak, atmospheric thriller. And it has just a lot in it that people are going to really, really enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Once again, this was Jessikah with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Simone St. James.
And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.